This video is a follow-on from the previous 32 videos dealing with price in the precious metals markets. If you haven't seen those videos, I'd recommend you doing so before watching this one. In the previous two videos, I gave an outline of the hyperinflationary event that took place in Germany circa 1923. A lesser known example of a hyperinflationary event is Hungary, the worst periods lasting from summer of 1945 to summer of 1946. So let's take a look at that. There are a couple of academics, Hanke-Krus from the Institute of Applied Economics, who have studied the phenomena of hyperinflation and produced a set of criteria for calculating the inflation rate, or rather the rate of hyperinflation. They've produced a hyperinflation table showing the time for prices to double. Please note, they say prices doubling, whereas they should say currency devaluing. Whether this is a genuine mistake or some form of deliberate misdirection, I don't know. But anyway, the list has some surprises. Hungary is at the top of the list, which is why I've included it in this mini-series. Our story starts at the outset of World War I, when precious metal coins were withdrawn from circulation and replaced by paper money, or more correctly, it should be referred to as paper currency. It was called the Korona, spelt with a K. The Austro-Hungarian Empire came to an end after World War I and became Hungary as we know it today. During the 1920s, Hungary suffered from a high inflation rate. Something had to be done. The measures that the Hungarian government took proved ineffective, so the League of Nations, the forerunner to the UN, stepped in and made a loan to the Hungarian government, which shored up the Korona. Nevertheless, their troubles with their currency continued. As a result, the pengo came into being on 1st of January 1927, replacing the Korona. For the sake of keeping things simple, let's fast forward in time to World War II. Hungary had joined the Axis powers during World War II, and so they were on the losing side. Hyperinflationary event happened from around that point onwards. The reasons for the hyperinflation in Hungary include the high cost of war reparations, lack of adequate reserves, the damage caused by the war, the cost of the occupation. They had to pay for the Soviet troops staying in the country. As has happened in Germany some years earlier, to deal with these problems, the Hungarian government started to print money. This seems to be a common course of action for governments that are drowning in debt. Governments recognise that they cannot meet the debt obligations, so they opt for the route of hyperinflation and monetising the debt. The debt gets repaid, but with worthless currency, so it could be argued that technically it is not a debt default. Anyway, the Hungarian authorities got the printing presses into action. Bear in mind that this was back when cash was king. Nowadays we live in an era of digital currencies. Prior to our digital age, cash, paper currency was all that was available. The actual amount of cash in an economy these days is only about 5%. The other 95% is digital. Currency creation now is just a matter of inputting data into a banking computer system. That's it. A few keystrokes on a keyboard, nothing more than that, and it's all done as desired. Back to Hungary. Through the course of the hyperinflationary event, the Hungarian authorities issued a series of notes of higher and higher denominations. The socio-political and economic woes worsened as time went on. The Hungarian authorities made several attempts to slow inflation down, but to no avail. Notes of higher denominations continued to be issued, the highest being 100 quintillion pengos. That's 1 with 20 zeros, or 100 million. Prices of products doubled every 15 hours. In July 1946, the inflation rate reached a peak of about 41.9 quadrillion %. That's per month. In the May 1946, the Hungarian authorities had no option but to introduce a new currency, the pengo, which was supposed to be only used for paying taxes, but in July this became legal tender. But by this time, both the pengo and the pengo were in free fall. The situation got so dire that by the end of July, neither currency was being printed. In August 1946, the Hungarian authorities introduced a completely new currency, the forint. They linked the new currency to gold, settling an exchange rate of 13.21 forints per gram of gold. This strategy worked. The new currency stabilised. This shows that the most effective way to counter hyperinflation is to institute a sound money system, linking currency to something like gold. A gold standard has been the traditional means of backing currencies. This is what should happen now, but our overlords are in control at present and they don't want this to happen because it runs counter to their plans. They don't like the gold standard for various different reasons, one of which is that it requires governments to be fiscally prudent. Need I say more? They got rid of the gold standard in America in 1971 with the Nixon shock so that they could carry out their long con. The culmination of which is they intend to introduce the CBDCs after a hyperinflationary event and once the whole worldwide financial system crashes. This is the Great Reset as imagined by our overlords, the WEF's wet dream. CBDCs will allow our overlords to eventually usher in the new world order, a feudal-like system of bygone times comprised of serfs and lords. And so, alas, it would seem that in the short term we're headed for hyperinflation and an almighty crash. To my way of thinking, these two events are now virtually guaranteed. Be advised, the banking crisis is not over. We've only seen the first wave. More bank failures will follow. The crisis in banking and the coming crisis in the bond markets will be the mechanisms by which our overlords usher in hyperinflation, because they will demand that the systemically important banks and governments be rescued, bailouts basically, and it's all done by design. The central banks will then be portrayed not as the villains but as the heroes, our saviours, and the people, if they remain ignorant, will thank them for it. So our overlords intend to destroy or swallow the smaller banks, leave the big banks standing for the people to keep their currency in, and then use those to roll out the CBDCs. I've done a whole mini-series on CBDCs, so I won't go into detail here. All I will say is that if you want to be subject to the whims of our overlords, if you fancy being a serf for the rest of your life, then CBDCs and a social credit system are for you. And all that is required is your compliance and your apathy. Just do nothing. I'm reminded of the lyric from House Martin's song entitled Think for a Minute. It says, apathy is happy now, it's won without a fight. Our overlords want the populace to be apathetic because it means that they win without a fight. This will be how it plays out unless more people wake up to what is going on and do something about it. After hyperinflationary event and the crash, we will be faced with a simple choice. The choice we face will be between freedom and totalitarian tyranny. So, either as a society we learn the lessons from history, we get wise to their nefarious plans, we act smart, or we choose to stay stupid and find ourselves fated not just to repeat the same mistakes but allow ourselves to continue to be conned by this bunch of cunts. So essentially, this will be a pivotal moment in human history. Sounding a more positive note, people do seem to be waking up. Our overlords might not get their way, and hopefully, as soon as they are removed from power and dealt with, there should be no impediment. A gold standard should be reinstituted, or some kind of currency backing. To have a normal functioning society and also freedom, I think that this has to happen. I live in hope. In the meantime, precious metals, gold and silver will be shining bright. Those who hold precious metals should prosper, or maybe I should qualify this by saying they should survive the events to come, and they might well thrive. That is if our overlords don't remain in power. Otherwise, humanity is well and truly fucked. Wise up and rise up.